Obviously, we are ecstatic with the results. George Zimmerman was never guilty of anything except protecting himself in self-defense. I'm glad that the jury saw it that way, and I hope that everyone who thinks, particularly those who doubted George's reasons and doubted his background, now understand that the jury knew everything that they knew was enough for them to find him not guilty. You know even more than the jury know about both parties' past, and we know that George was the type individual, from what you know, and his involvement in his community. This was not a unique event for George to try and be involved with his community and to be involved with the police when it was necessary. I'm just glad that the jury saw it that way. Very, very happy with the results.
Sometimes I can be a little more blunt. I think the prosecution of George Zimmerman was disgraceful. I am gratified by the jury's verdict, as happy as I am for George Zimmerman. I'm thrilled that this jury kept this tragedy from becoming a travesty. For that, we are eternally grateful. But it makes me sad, too, that it took this long, under these circumstances, to finally get justice.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. Hi there, Amanda Evans, News 13. I have a question for you, Mr. West. This case became a little personal for you. There were some threats made to your family, some jabs about opening statements. We all watched as things kind of got heated between you and Judge Nelson. Can you talk about what this was like for you, this trial, these last few weeks, just personally?
Sure. Stop me if you've heard this one before. No, I'm not going to talk about that. No. This trial is about George Zimmerman, not about pictures of ice cream cones or... Now, I still think the joke was funny. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry I didn't tell it better, but there was an important reason for it. There needed to be a disconnect, frankly, a disconnect from an act that was hard to follow. But I knew, Mr. O'Mara knew, and you all soon found out that it was indeed just an act. I couldn't follow that act with that kind of passion and glaring and staring and all of that. We needed facts. Unlike what Ms. Corey said, they brought the facts. They didn't. Anybody that watched this trial knew the defense put on the case. We proved George Zimmerman was not guilty. So, no, I won't talk about that. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Ben Montgomery, Tampa Bay Times. Can you give us any insight into Mr. Zimmerman's state of mind upon hearing the verdict?
I don't know exactly how you can feel when you're in trauma and stress for 16 months. And he's very, very happy with the result, obviously. There's just a release that happens, an emotion release, and endorphin release, and adrenaline release. I think it's probably going to settle on him tonight when he's with his family and can actually realize that he doesn't need to come back to the courthouse tomorrow or ever again unless he wants to under his own free will. So I think he's going to be great. I think he's still worried. And hopefully everyone will respect the jury's verdict as they should, and most have said they would, and we'll take it day by day. But he's doing good.
This is Grace Wong with In Session. I know this is a yes or no question, but I want you to expand on it after I ask the question. Was this a fair fight for you?
You know, let me say it this way. I need to apologize to every public defender in the state. And for this reason, because I said that the way that we were treated in the discovery process and the fights that we had to go through in the discovery process made me think that maybe the prosecution thought they were dealing with a couple of young, overworked public defenders. And that insulted public defenders. Don West was one. I learned my craft from public defenders because when I was a prosecutor, that's who I learned from. So to the extent that there was some insult there, I apologize for it. What I meant to say was that it seemed as though the prosecution is used to getting away with some of what they got away with the enormous demands they put upon us to try and get discovery that in 30 years of experience, I've always gotten on the table right up front. So yes, it was a fight that we had to fight. They outfunded us. They made it extraordinarily difficult. If only we had the time back that it took us to fight for the stuff, the information, discovery, the just result that we had to fight for, this case might have been tried 6 months ago, and certainly I wouldn't have had the hundreds and hundreds of hours wasted in a situation where they never should have made us waste time. Was it fair? You know, it was a little bit David and Goliath, but we won.
Danny Morales with the Valencia Voice here. George had a very good poker face on when the verdict came in. At what point did he express his gratitude to you and how excited he was to finally be able to go home?
I think per what we discussed with him beforehand, it was after everyone sort of left the room when you can actually show a little bit more emotions. You know, you just, when you have an emotional outpouring like that, you know, sometimes you get that on a camera or something like that. It's not really what you want to see. But he certainly thanked us, obviously, and I think he was able to finally emote as it became a realization that he truly is done.
Hi, Lisa Lucas, New York Daily News. I'd like to ask you what you feel was your best moment and your weakest moment, and ask the same of you to say that for the prosecution.
I think the best moment was when they said not guilty. I think that was probably the best moment right then.
I agree with that.
So that's it. And during the trial, if you haven't heard of trial hypnosis, I'll explain it to you. I absolutely believe that every time I opened my mouth, it was a great moment. Nobody else thought so, but I always did. So it was the whole, it's a trial. It's where we live. It's like a surgeon being in surgery. It's where you want to be. It's what you want to do. So everything that we did was with a purpose and a plan. Most of it worked out how we wanted. Every motion we filed, every argument we made, it's just what we do as decent trial lawyers.
Lisa Lampkin, NBC News.
Hello,
Mark, I
Lisa.
have a couple legal questions. One is, speaking about the state attorney's office, now that you've gotten the not guilty verdict you wanted, are you still going to pursue the sanctions, number one? And then second of all, hopefully not upsetting your wife, because I'm sure you're going to need a vacation, but how are you going to address the civil aspect of this now, as far as the stand your ground and keeping George Zimmerman from being liable?
Sure, as to the first, yes, there's a sanctions hearings to be set. There is not only that, but of course the state is then responsible for a lot of the costs that we've incurred to acquit George Zimmerman, so we're going to have a hearing on that as well. So yeah, we're not quite done yet. And on the civil aspect, if someone believes that it's appropriate to sue George Zimmerman, then we will seek and we will get immunity in a civil hearing. And we'll see just how many civil lawsuits are spawned from this fiasco. So.
Finn Gomez with Fox News. Mr. O'Mara, Mr. West, what happens to, I know this seems like a kind of a basic follow-up, but what happens now to Mr. Zimmerman? Are we going to hear from him? What does he do now? Where does he go? Like, what's next for your client?
I don't know what you do after 16 months of this. I'm really not sure. I think you need to just go somewhere, relax, get your bearings back. You know, I think that he would like to, once he settles in, let you know who he really is, since that couldn't be told except through us, and even in that way, quite limited. But I'm sure that if he could wave his magic wand, he would just sort of get his life back. And I know that always brings up the idea of the life that's lost forever, and I'm not comparing the two, but now that the jury decided that he acted properly in self-defense, maybe we can give him a little bit of that understanding as well, that he now needs to get on with his life after having suffered several traumas.
Hello, sir.
Hi.
I have a two-part question, Molly Hennessy Fisk with the LA Times. The first part is the prosecution raised this question about whether the outcome would be different if the races of the defendant and the victim were different. Do you think it would have been different if George Zimmerman was black? And the other part of my question is, does he fear for his safety? Have precautions been made surrounding his security?
Well, I think that the things would have been different if George Zimmerman was black for this reason. He never would have been charged with a crime. It seems as though what happened was an event that was being looked into by Sanford Police Department, and quite honestly, as we now know, looked into quite well. I have taken advantage of police departments who have not done a good investigation of crimes, because that's what I do for a living. When I looked at the Sanford Police Department investigation, they had done quite a good job, and you can compare what they did across the country to see who does good or bad jobs with their investigation, but they were doing quite a lot. What happened was this became a focus for a civil rights event, which again is a wonderful event to have, but they decided that George Zimmerman would be the person who they were to blame and sort of use as the creation of a civil rights violation, none of which was borne out by the facts. The facts that night was not borne out that he acted in a racial way. His history is a non-racist, and you know all the anecdotes about the mentees and the children living in his home when he was young and the Sherman Ware incident. So if only those who decide to condemn Mr. Zimmerman as quickly and as viciously as they did would have taken just a little bit of time to find out who it was that they were condemning, it would never have happened. And it certainly wouldn't have happened if he was black, because those people who decided that they were going to make him the scapegoat would not have.
What about safety?
And I'm sorry?
She can ask.
She did have a two-part question.
All right. I'll ask her question because I wanted to ask that too. First of all, is he, how concerned is he? Is he going to sort of stay in hiding for a while and sort of feel it out and see what happens? And then the second question is, I've never seen jurors thank defense attorneys for giving them instructions on the law before, as what happened to you during jury selection. My jaw dropped open. What was your reaction when they thanked you for explaining the law?
As to the first question, yes, he has to be very cautious and protective of his safety, because there is still a fringe element who have said, at least in tweets and everything else, that they want revenge, that they will not listen to a verdict of not guilty, although I think everyone in this room would agree this was a very fair trial. More fair to the state maybe on occasions than to the defense, but certainly it was a fair enough trial in that the state got to present everything that they could. So in that sense, those people who have their anger, they're just going to have it because they're angry people, not because it's based in fact. Can't help that, but we do need to be worried about it. Second question, I mentioned it earlier, everything I do I think is done well. I don't remember a juror actually verbalizing thank you to me when I'm trying to help them understand an area of law that, as we talked about, is utterly unique, and we drag them in off the street and ask them to take on our mantle of how we work our lives in these courtrooms and to do it well. But maybe I'll take that as a compliment that they were listening. And obviously, they got an opportunity to put that in practice with their verdict.